Much has been written and said about the Reagan children, Michael, the late Maureen, Patty Davis, and Ron. Joining us now from Washington is Doug Weed, the author of the book, All the President's Children. And from Los Angeles, Mary Beth Brown, a friend of both Michael and Maureen Reagan, and author of the book, Hand of Providence, The Strong and Quiet Faith of Ronald Reagan. We'll begin with you, Ms. Brown. Ladies usually go first on this program. The Philadelphia Inquirer, as I mentioned in the Talking Points memo at the top of the broadcast, said, quote, that President Reagan was estranged from several of his children. Is that accurate?
Well, what I found is you need to look back at President Reagan's childhood. And if you look at his childhood, it was his mother who took a real active role in his rearing of him, and his father took a more passive role. And so that's the way he raised his own children, with the mothers taking an active role in their children's lives. And so that's where I think you see some differences. And Maureen, they also had the influence of their grandmother, Nellie, who played a big part in their life. Mike told me one thing that his father was very sad about, and I didn't put this in the book, but he shared with me how sad his father was that both Patty and Ron were not Christians and did not share his faith. And that was something that continued to make him very sad.
That's interesting. And his father, Ronald Reagan, as we pointed out yesterday, was an alcoholic, which, of course, has, for anybody who's the son or daughter of an alcoholic, has a bearing on how you raise children as well. Now, Mr. Weed, how about you reacting to this Philadelphia Inquirer deal, which I thought was really, really malicious and should not have been written, about the estrangement of the children? Is it accurate? We see them together now. Maureen Reagan, of course, passed away from cancer. But how do you see that quote?
Well, I think Mary gave a great answer. For Ronald Reagan, the fact that his relationship and the example of his own father was not the best. He was a kind and gracious man, and because of that, even though his role model and his perception of what a father should be may not have been enough for these four kids, because he was kind, because he was gracious, those four kids got in there and they demanded it, and they got a piece out of him, and they've been able to have some closure, especially in these last few years.
Yeah, I think they all say that, but it looks to me like Reagan, Michael and Maureen, the children of the first marriage with Jane Wyman, they didn't have a lot of issues. Doesn't seem to me. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes.
You guys.
Oh, I think they did. I think they
really?
did, Bill.
Yeah.
I think they did. I think Ron and Patty were the closest, and therefore their attempts to get attention from the father was by opposing him. They felt strong enough, just like a little child, to come up and kick his daddy on the leg. You know, look at me. They opposed his philosophy. They opposed his ideology. Ron became a journalist, which, I mean, journalists were calling their dad a racist and a warmonger and incompetent, and he became one of the enemies, so to speak. And the two outsiders, Maureen and Michael, who came from that first marriage, they sought attention and approval from their father through mimicry, by saying, hey, look, Dad, I'm running for the Senate. Look, I can do it. I'm the first woman in American history, child of a president, to head a national political party. And Michael today, in my opinion, is doing exactly what Ronald Reagan would be doing if he were the son of a president at his age.
Do you see it that way, Ms. Brown?
Well, I see it that Michael did have some difficult times when he was young. It was very hard growing up with two very famous parents. But he tells me about wonderful memories he has, and Maureen also, when they were young, going to the ranch. And Michael told me that his father was always someone he could go to when he had difficult times, and he had a wonderful way of putting things into perspective for him.
All right. Was it all about attention, Mr. Weed? Is that what the problem was? Because Ronald Reagan, obviously, a movie star, then segues into a governorship and then as president. Because Patty Davis, obviously, was the biggest rebel, doing the Playboy magazine deal and outspoken this and that. Was it all about attention?
No, it's not all about attention. There are other issues, and one issue is identity. You'll notice that Patty Davis changed her name from Patty Reagan to Patty Davis. I mean, what kind of statement is that? And the interesting thing is, if you study the presidential children, you'll find this has happened many times before. Rutherford B. Hayes' daughter changed her name. And very interestingly, sometimes towards the end of their life, they'll come back and take the presidential name again. And what the child is saying in that instance is, I am different from you. I am separate from you. It is very hard to establish your own identity when your mother's the first lady and your dad's the president. And FDR had 5 children who had 19 marriages between them. 2 of the in-laws committed suicide because if you don't know your own identity, how can you relate to someone else? So the real trauma is in establishing the identity.
Okay. But right now there's been a rapprochement, it looks like.
There has been.
Right. And all 3 surviving children only have very, very good things to say about their father. That's correct, right?
And they're in a good profession. All 3 of them are expressing. Patty is lecturing, she's writing, Ron's in journalism, and Michael's on the radio every day, and that bodes well for them if they can keep speaking and learning through expression. They're going to be healthy.
And Ms. Brown, I mean, I think that as you get older, you mature also and understand perhaps more about your parents. I know I did. Than you did when you were younger and rebellious, correct?
Yes, and I